Hello guys, ColNinny here. There are two occasions when stalling your aircraft is really bad news. The first is when you're coming in to land and you stall and crash. And the second is when you're in a dogfight and you turn very sharply and you stall and lose the advantage. And that's what we're going to look at today. The first thing you have to realize is the effect of the airflow over the control surfaces like the ailerons, the rudder, and the elevators. The faster we go, the more effective and the more crisp the feel is on all those control surfaces. At 400 or 500 kilometers an hour, this is beautiful. This makes this aeroplane snap and do what it's supposed to do. So the general rule for the precise control of the aircraft is to fly it as fast as possible. However, there are two times in every flight where you and your aircraft go through an aerodynamic problem. Every time you take off and every time you land, you must transition through a slow flight area. This is not noticeable on takeoff, but it is very noticeable and very deadly on the approach to landing. So what happens and why does it happen? And once we understand these things, then we can do our best to control them. It's all about maintaining a continuous and steady airflow over the wings. When the airflow is not interrupted, the control surfaces have their maximum effect. Whenever we're in a turn, one wing will fly faster than the other. This is because it has to cover more ground to get around the corner. So in a turn, the outside wing will actually be traveling faster than the inside wing. And because it moves faster, it creates more airflow. Therefore, it has more lift than the inside wing. Depending on the conditions, it can get to the point where a wing can no longer generate lift. Quite often, this happens in a turn. The exciting thing here is that the inner wing will lose lift and stall, and the outside wing will continue to generate lift and raise the wing. This combination of one wing flying and the other wing not flying actually flips the aircraft over. This is called a stall. You'll notice that on the BF-109 that the left wing tends to stall more often than the right wing. And generally speaking, it's probably because the airflow from the prop doesn't cover the left wing as much as the right and generate as much lift. However, if you know that the left wing is likely to stall before the right, you can take steps to prevent it. There are several reasons why an aircraft's wings may stall, and it could be in a climbing turn or a descending turn or even straight and level. Just depends on the aircraft and the circumstances, but as far as we're concerned, we just need to understand that the wings will stall, and we need to make sure that we pay attention when we feel the aircraft getting to that slow flight regime. So let's compare here the control response at slower speed to that of the higher speed. And as you can see, it's very slow to respond. It's very mushy as compared to crisp. Think of it like an old lettuce. We can still maintain perfect control of the aircraft, but it takes 3 or 4 times as long to turn it into the direction we'd like to go. But that's not a problem, because when we're coming into land, we're not in a rush. We just want to do it right. So think of slow flight as those conditions which are leading up to a stall. Slow flight is very distinctive. It's a wallowing, it's a mushing, it's a flopping around. It's a poor response to the controls. It's easily recognizable. And believe it or not, you cannot say that this will happen at a particular indicated airspeed because the conditions vary. But I would say that anytime you're flying under 200 kilometers an hour, you're entering into that danger zone that you need to pay attention to. Being very good at recognizing your approach to the stall through the slow flight area is literally the difference between life and death. Or another way to look at it is if you've had a very successful mission and you've got a lot of points, you're not going to be able to claim them if you die on the landing at your home airfield. I should emphasize the need for you to really pay attention when you're on the approach and to keep all your control movements and your power inputs and reductions to a minimum. A sudden control input could stall the aircraft and have you crash on the approach. Flaps generate lift, but they also generate drag. So we should practice using both and see what effect they have on us, especially when we're close to the ground. As we extend the flaps to 40 degrees, I want you to watch the altimeter and the airspeed indicator. I am simply maintaining the pressure on the stick, and you'll notice that because of the lift generated by the flaps, the altitude increases. And because the nose is going up, the airspeed starts to decrease. There is no change to the power setting here. And the opposite is true when we raise the flaps. The altimeter starts to decrease and the airspeed starts to increase as the nose comes down. So just think about that for a second. As we come into land, we lower the flaps. What happens to the nose? It goes up. What happens to the airspeed? It goes down. That puts us closer into the slow flight range. But there is one positive thing, and that is that the flaps, by creating more lift, actually give us a little bit more control. Let's look now at the effect of the rudder in straight and level flight. When we push on hard right rudder, you can see that the left wing advances and the right wing tends to fall back. You can also see that the leading edge slats on either side of the wing will deploy, telling you that you're in a slow flight area. This means that we must be very careful on how we apply rudder when we're in slow flight, because we can bring it into a stall by stepping on the rudder too hard. Or we can also stall it by not pressing the rudder hard enough. That comes with practice. The one instrument in the aircraft that tells us what the rudder is doing is the ball at the turn and bank indicator. If the aircraft is flying in a coordinated manner, then the ball will be in the center. That means it's not slipping or skidding. When the ball is off center, we need to step on it with that rudder. So if it's to the right, we step on it with the right rudder. If it's to the left of center, we step on it with the left. Even though we're in slow flight, look how beautifully smooth and coordinated this turn is. The ball is in the center. We could do this all day without running a risk of stalling. There's another really good reason to learn to control the ball at all times, and that is when you come to fire your weapons or drop your ordnance. If the ball is not centered, your rounds or your bombs are going to go one side or the other of the target. When we add a lot of power, you'll find the left wing drops. Now we know that when we add power, we're going to need to use right rudder. So we need to coordinate that and try it again. Take some practice. In the full flap configuration, we have 2300 RPM and 150 kilometers an hour. And you'll see that the leading edge slats are deployed practically all the time. until we take a little further and the one wing stalls out. We've got to get that nose down. The trouble is the flaps want to lift the nose up, so it may take a bit more time than if you were clean. And clean means no flaps, no gear. So you can practice getting a nice smooth recovery. There's something called a secondary stall. That's when you stall once, don't do a proper recovery, and end up stalling again, which is usually a little bit more violent. So don't think of flying with full flap as having less control. It's just different control, and you just need to practice it. I mean, we can still fly upside down, and in this example we're actually using 20 degrees of flap, and you can see, provided we keep the ball in the center, everything's cool. So we'll finish this video off with a good approach and landing, just to make sure that you've got the concepts right. So we're on the downwind leg with the end of the runway about 45 degrees off our wingtip. So we'll drop the gear and we'll start our turn onto the base leg, which will be a left turn to intercept the final leg. While we're doing this, we're dropping our flaps and we're trying to maintain a speed of about 200. What's important here is to be in the right place at the right time, and that just comes with practice. Strictly speaking, we should be coming down the center line of the runway, but I want you to be able to see where the end of the runway is in relation to the nose. If we don't change the nose up and down, we're going to fly right onto that threshold. So we'll maintain our 200 kilometers an hour and hold everything steady, keep the ball in the center, and we should be good. Understand this is the most critical time with the speed and the controls. We get over the end of the runway and we start to flare the nose up. We bring it up to bleed off the speed. The speed drops off and we touch down. Keep it straight with rudders, apply the brakes. Thanks for watching, guys, and please check out my channel if you want to learn a few other things about how to fly these aircraft. As always, if you've enjoyed this video, found it helpful, please like it or subscribe, or if there's another topic you'd like me to cover, please leave a comment.